Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Hold My Drink, where we navigate the news and politics with a chaser of civility. I'm your host, Jen, inviting you to grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and imagine with us how to create a new American identity together. Welcome to this week's Hold My Drink and Counterweight podcast live. David, this is our first time going live.
A little nerve-wracking.
It is a little nerve-wracking, probably more so for Gabs than for us. And that's our guest today is Gabs Clark, goes by Gabs. We've got a lot to talk to her about. Gabs, first, did you bring a drink for this happy hour conversation?
You know, I ordered a peach tea, so.
Well, you are visiting Texas, so that is very apropos. Good for you. David, what about you?
You know, when my dad comes to visit, he always wants Southern Comfort. And so I have this bottle. It was very accessible. And I actually like it, so I poured myself a little glass.
That's some SoCo. That is like some college. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a college drink. Mm-hmm. Okay, I have to tell you, I'm very excited. I'm going out of my norm. I have got a mojito.
Ooh, I love mojitos.
But I'm a little bit worried that during this live broadcast, I'm going to get like a mint, leaf stuck in my teeth or like stuck on my lips. So yeah, thanks.
We'll call you out if it happens. No
yeah, because the screen is really small now. I can't really see myself. So let me know. Anyways, Gabs, I've been posting a lot about your fight about the First Amendment in Las Vegas. But before we even go there, can you just tell us a little bit about you? Who's Gabs Clark? And then from there, just introduce us into the battle that you are currently facing.
Who am I?
I know that's a big story, but a lot of people, I want to know you. A lot of people are talking about your First Amendment fight, but I give us a little bit of background on who you are.
I'm originally from Houston.
Okay.
I'm originally from Houston, and I'm biracial. My mom is Black and my dad was white. And I lived in Houston up until in my 20s, and then I moved to Dallas for 10 years, and then I lived in Las Vegas for the rest of that time. And I'm a widow. My first husband was Black. My second husband was white, and he passed away. And I have 5 children. So, prior to all of this, I was excited about graduating my youngest son and moving on to pushing my last child, my daughter, into that direction, so I could, kind of be done with motherhood. In the earlier years, I had no idea that this was going to, be such a big part of my life. And at the beginning of the school year, I just started noticing things in my daughter's class. They were virtual learning that I was not happy with, and I started paying closer attention. And then I realized there were some very, very seriously troubling things going on, and I withdrew my daughter that minute from that class, from that school, and put her in another school. And I went to my son, and I asked what was going on in his class. And when he showed me, I was horrified.
Mm-hmm.
Describe what that is. I'd love to hear what you saw.
Well, all of the materials, all of the class materials that I saw are all available on the website noleftturn.us under the Clark lawsuit. They're also, most of it is public record. I mean, there's all kinds of influencers and whatnot that have tweeted about it and written about it and all that stuff. But essentially, I just saw things about race and gender and religion, just those types of things that I thought were highly inappropriate for a civics class. I thought that was highly inappropriate. But even with that, the slides and things notwithstanding, the assignment that they asked my son to do was the serious issue for me, the most serious issue for me, which was that he was instructed to list his identities, his race, religion, sexual gender, and disabilities, and then attach signifiers like privilege or oppressor to those identities. And you're not gonna do that to my kid. I don't know what. You're not gonna do that to my kid. You know, we were at that time. At that particular time, I had just finished recovering from a disability myself, for where I was in a wheelchair for years, and then COVID happened, so I couldn't. So I had to stay home with my daughter and wasn't able to get a job. So we were living in a motel for a while. And when that happened, we were living in a motel and William was sleeping on a mat on the floor. There was nothing privileged about his life. His dad died when he was 1 year old. There's been nothing that you can attach any kind of privilege to. At the very least, the color of his skin. So that wasn't going to happen to one of my kids. And all of his siblings agreed.
How did you handle it with the school? Other than, I know you took out your daughter, how did you convey your displeasure with the school?
I told my I told my sons what was happening. I told my kids what was happening, and they couldn't believe it. We discussed it as a family, and then I got in touch with the principal and the teachers, and I explained to them our position.
And were they receptive, or did they just kind of show you the door?
Well, we ultimately had to sue them. So,
well, clearly, that's why I was wondering. I was wondering
so
how
you showed them the door.
Yeah. I mean, so obviously, it had to escalate to that point where they weren't receptive to what your son was going through.
Right. Well, we asked for a remedy, and when we didn't get one, I followed the appropriate chain of command and documented everything. And when I didn't receive a remedy from anybody, and I got in touch with everybody, and when nobody would take me seriously, and they didn't understand that I was not kidding, I was dead serious. You're not going to do this to my kid. And when they didn't believe me, I didn't have any other choice. And William didn't have any other choice. His conviction really is much stronger than mine. I'm just doing what my son asked me to do.
Really?
I mean, I'm going to protect my kid in any way that I can.
And wasn't it true too that one of the big things was he was failing this class because he refused to abide by the identifiers that they were trying to put upon him? Did I get that right?
They have since reversed course on that issue and allowed him to opt out of the class. They expunged his record and he was able to graduate. But at the time, they were saying that he could not pass that class without completing his work, and that he couldn't graduate without passing the class. And that was unacceptable to our family.
And this class is a mandatory class. He had to take this class. It wasn't an elective or anything like that.
No, it was a mandatory class.
Okay. Do you think that they just recently, a couple of questions. Did they just recently make it mandatory? And did they just recently bring in this new kind of critical pedagogy into the class?
Well, I can't really speak to either one of those things. Because like every other parent, I thought everything going on in my kid's school was perfectly fine. With the exception of some other issues that I had just kind of chalked up to teen angst and having teenagers.
Yeah.
And I've since realized that a lot of things going on in all the schools all over the country are just not right.
Hmm.
How did you get from there to a lawsuit? What happened next?
Well, I mean, there's always a series of back and forth in every lawsuit, of going over and over. But ultimately, the positions on both sides remain the same. They said they weren't going to let him opt out of that class, and I said he wasn't taking that class, and that's all it was. I mean, and we couldn't come to an agreement on that. And
Hmm.
like I said, they have since reversed course on that and allowed him to opt out of that class and expunged his record of any bad grades from that class and allowed him to graduate.
What about your daughter? You said that, I mean, I wonder if you would have even recognized this if it wasn't for, in some ways, maybe the pandemic was a bit of a blessing because you first recognized it with your daughter, her being online school. And was that she was going to a different school than your son?
No, they
No.
were the same school.
Ah, and that was a different class. So what I'm hearing then is that this kind of pedagogy, this kind of teaching is not just in the civics class, it's part of the whole school structure, would you say?
I don't know. I can't speak to the teaching itself, but
Hmm.
I will say that there was a running theme that I thought was inappropriate for school age children.
And were you able to find an appropriate school for your daughter? I mean, are you worried that this is going to be in every school? I mean, you said you put your daughter in a different school. I'm worried that how do you get around this?
Well, the first thing I did was I asked, I called every school I could, and I asked them how they are handling diversity, and if they said something I didn't like, and I thought was wrong, then I was like, "Thank you very much for your time," and I hung up the phone, and I found, and I mean, if they said something that seemed, I mean, like, okay, I had one principal who said point blank, "We want to turn all of our students into social justice warriors." And I was like, "Thank you for your time," and I hung up the phone. Like, I mean, I want to turn my kid into a scientist. Well, you don't. That's not your goal. If that's not your goal, then you're not teaching. You're indoctrinating. Like, if, you know what I'm saying. If that's
Hmm.
not your goal, if your goal isn't to get your students to a place where they ascend to a college level, then you're not teaching. That if that's not your goal. So to me, um, I wanted to get my kid into a classical liberal education. I'm a conservative, a lifelong conservative, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I want my kids to go to a real strict, nothing like that. I just wanted them to go to a have classical liberal education where they can feel free to explore ideas without anybody giving them the sense that this is the way it is and you can't dispute this, or this is this is the prescription that we're giving to you and you can't do anything about it.
Mm.
I wanted my kids to excel in STEM. I wanted them to be able to choose their path in life and not have it dictated for them. And to me, that's the way this is going. And so, yes, it was very difficult. I spent all day trying to find a school for my daughter. And even now, we still have other issues in our schools that we still have to worry about. Social emotional learning has become kind of intertwined with critical race theory, and I think that is how people like Dr. Elena Fishbein and all the people in No Left Turn in Education um, got got together and kind of made the decision to organize and fight this because we want our kids to be educated, not indoctrinated.
Right. Right. So you said at some point they reversed course and allowed your son to opt out of that class, but you're still in a lawsuit with the system. Can you explain the nature of the lawsuit?
Well, we just filed an amended complaint, and I'm not a lawyer. I let them lawyer it up with all their. No, um, I'm not I couldn't even begin to tell you about what all of that rigmarole means. But ultimately, we want justice for my son. Just because they decided to let him graduate, look at what we had to go through
Right.
for that to happen. We had to fight for his rights that should have been established and it should have been observed without us having to throw the most expensive temper tantrum in all of human history.
Right.
We should not have had to do that. It has severely disrupted our entire family's lives, and that's something that we should not have had to do, and
Yeah.
we're going to continue because we don't want any other families to have to do it either.
Yeah. You are giving your kids an alternative civics lesson. You realize that, though.
Well, actually, ironically, I'm giving them the same lesson that their school was giving them. Their school told them to stand up for what you believe in and buck the system if the system is unjust, and that's exactly what William did.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something else, though, like with regards to civics, and specifically, we have Truth in Between, the organization that I founded, has done an alternative 1619 project. So we knew that 1619 was going to be put into the schools, put into civics classes, whatnot. And we said, so instead of saying ban it, let's say if you're going to do that, because we do, I believe, I don't say we, I believe, history is important. And I don't know that we've always done the best job of reviewing history. So we created the alternative 1619, which isn't just an alternative. It is here's 1619. So we literally took essay by essay. And we said, here, read this. All right, 1619 essay, but then read this. And then we had like kind of a update or not an update, that's the wrong word, but a follow up on why we paired those two. And for us, we thought that was an elegant solution to something that I think a lot of people who are introducing CRT or an evolution of CRT. We use that word, very loosely now. Some anti-racism or anti-white or whatever, what it's evolved into. So I think that if we're going to, their original concern was that we weren't dealing with history well. That's the original concern, and it's just kind of morphed from that into being race essentialism, and all the ugly things that you've had to deal with.
Right.
So would you say if there was a civics class that was like what I just explained, the alternative 1619 project, how would you feel about that? I mean, do you feel like we're doing a good job of teaching our kids about, their history or our history? No, I'm sorry, our history. Slavery is all of our history, right? All these ugly things are our history. Do you think we're doing a good job of that? And if we're not, how would you say that we could amend that from your point of view, from what you've seen as a mother?
Well, I did homeschool my kids for several years. They've spent more time in homeschools and charter schools than they had in public schools by and large. And no, we're certainly not doing as good a job as we could be doing in anything as far as education goes, if we're to be honest. But a lot of, and I'm seeing this especially with Black conservatives that are saying, hey, look, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need to have a more comprehensive, accurately historical understanding of what America is. And I have to agree with that. I have to agree with that. But we don't need to do that by telling the Black kids they can't excel because white people won't let them. That's that is no.
It's shocking to me. I'm so glad that you put up the actual curriculum on no left turn, and I'll write that into the notes, because when I was searching for curriculum to write, because again, our big thing is alternative curriculum. Okay, do this, but also do this. It's almost become a secret, Gabs. Like what the actual syllabus, like actually finding the syllabus is, it's a challenge, which that right there should tell you there is something wrong, right? I mean, teachers will not put their syllabus up online.
And that has been a concern for me for years. And I would always ask for teachers, for any teachers, all of their syllabi. Like I would ask for all of that. And, some teachers I would get that, and some teachers I wouldn't. And it had always concerned me. And like you were saying a while ago, the pandemic has, and I've said this before, this is the silver lining in, of what happened with the pandemic. Parents got to see exactly why their kids were having these hard times in school, and why their kids were feeling disconnected, and just all of these things that were unexplained before, and getting to understand why their kids weren't excelling in the areas that they should have been, or getting to a place in their education that they should have, because instead of spending time on learning math, language, and science, they're spending time on stuffies and learning all of that nonsense. We don't send our kids to school for that. And I understand that there are some things that need to be done, but first and foremost, the syllabus is one of those things that I feel like, if you don't have a problem with the parents knowing what is in your syllabus, then you should go ahead and just put it up on your website, because every school has one, and it all has almost limitless space to put up anything. So every teacher, it should be mandatory that every teacher put up their syllabus, and we shouldn't have to file FOIA request after FOIA request to get the syllabus, and then get the origin from it, and where it came from, and who paid for it, and what who provided that syllabus, or who provided that particular curriculum. We should. That's the kind of thing that should be up there, and every school should be excited to know that parents want to see it.
And that's a legit. I mean, that is absolutely within a parent's right. And like I said, I just repeat, it's so scary that you can't even get the syllabi. And to echo what you said, it wasn't with one of my son's classes, but with a friend's daughter, and she was taking this class, and this was during the right after George Floyd murder, and within a month of it, and the teacher was offering extra credit for the kids to go to the protests, and that's fine. Yeah, extra. I mean, I actually heard it with my ears, like, and again, like I'm okay if teachers are like, hey, I'm going, whatever. But like, to give extra credit to make your grade dependent on something that you might not believe. I mean, I actually, like, because it wasn't my child, I just kind of like, I was like, whoa, like,
well, forget don't believe we were having a pandemic. Like, that's the reason why we were supposed to not be, at school and at work to begin with, because we were in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, I understand what you're saying, though. I wouldn't allow my kid to go to a protest because safety. You know what I mean? I wouldn't allow one of my children to go to a protest, and a teacher certainly shouldn't be. That's the kind of stuff that you can do in college. You know what I mean? College students can make that determination for themselves and assess whether or not they want to participate in that kind of thing. But to require that of a kid, I don't understand why people are insisting that if they treat kids like adults, then they'll automatically be able to think like adults. No, they're children, and we should keep them as innocent as possible. And that includes, that sans the the protests. You know what I'm saying? Let's let that, you know, happen later on. We don't need to, you know, turn our kids into and make, well, really make those kinds of decisions for them. You know, one of the things that I've prided myself on as a mother is being able to allow my children to see whatever and explore whatever avenue they feel is right for their conscience. You know, and they say if this is something they believe in, then I'll support that. One of my kids was a vegetarian for 7 years. And let me please tell you, I was not super excited about that. But as a meat eater, you know, I was not super excited about that. And I was not super excited about having to make 2 dinners every night. But, you know, I supported my child's interests because it was important to him when he told me, mother, I cannot, animals are my friends and I can't eat my friends. And I was like, you know what? There are alternatives. It's not, you know what I mean? I gave him some parameters. I said, you have to eat fish and you have to eat eggs. That was it. You know, and I think I told him he had to drink milk. And, you know, that was, so he did, so that was how we handled that. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like you can allow your children to go down their path without trying to force them into something in an unauthentic way. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. So where are you now with this lawsuit? I'm sorry to take it in a legal direction, but where you filed a lawsuit. Is it going before an equal opportunity commission? Is it going before, or is it going straight to the courts? Do you know what the timing of that is? What's that like?
You mean like the EEOC? You talking about that?
EEOC, yes.
No, because we're not employees of the school.
Right, so it doesn't go through that step.
No.
Yeah, I should know that one, but right, it only goes if you're an employee of a school system.
Right, yeah, no, that's a Jody Shaw question.
Yes, it is. She's an EOC person.
So
but
we just, like I said, we just filed our amended complaint, and you know, there's all kinds of motions and this and that and all that neck and do, you know, that the lawyers have to do. And then there's a hearing, and then there's this thing, and then there's that. You know, that's one of those things you have to ask the lawyers, honey. I just show up when they call my name.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. Did you find there was a supportive community of people out there once you declared your opposition to what was happening in your school to help you make sure you got what you needed to be able to fight the good fight?
Well, you know, in the beginning, it took me a minute to find out what in the world I was doing, because I had no idea what this was all about. All I knew was that my son's rights were being violated. I didn't know what critical race theory was. I didn't know what any of that stuff was. So, you know, I got a Twitter and I started looking, because I'm like I said, I was planning a whole nother life for myself that didn't have anything to do with social media. And so, you know, I got on there and I looked for different people and things who were, and looking into those and finding what they were all about. I had to do a lot of reading and a lot of searching and trying to understand what this was all about. And the more that I understood it, the worse it got. And I was just like, oh, hell, you know, this is terrible. You know? And so, you know, I started looking for help. And you know, in so doing, I found it. You know, I found Dr. Borisenko, you know, Carlin Borisenko. I sent her everything I had. I sent a lot of stuff to a lot of people, but I sent everything that I had to her, and she did a video on it. And from there, after that, I saw Dr. Elena Fishbein on Tucker Carlson, and you know, I searched all over the place for her, because I had no idea, you know, of even how to find, you know, these people. I just did general searches to find out what was going on, and from there, I gave Elena the video that Carlin made, and Elena got me a lawyer. And from then on, we just, we've been kind of working our way up the chain, and in and out of all of these, different circles, to try to figure out what it is that we're dealing with and how we should respond.
So this might be a question that you, because it is kind of touches on the legal side, but I had a friend of mine who's a lawyer who was interested in this conversation, and he asked why, and again, if you can't answer this, fine, but why was it a First Amendment versus a Title, what is it, Title 9 or 7? Well, a civil rights issue. Why was it?
Civil rights.
Civil rights. Do you have any idea why the lawyers chose First Amendment versus civil rights for?
It's all of it. We in our filings, we allege all of them in our plea.
Okay.
It was compelled speech and Title 6 and Title 9.
Title 6, that's it. Title 6 and Title 9. There you go.
Right.
I mean,
David,
as well as other things. There were, I think all total, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 14 different things. But compelled speech is definitely one of those things that that's just a no-brainer, I mean, I think my very first interview, that was what I said. You can't go to a job and they can't ask you that stuff on a job. You know what I mean? Your employer can't ask you what religion you are and what race you are and all of that whole business. That's not right. That's not legal. So you shouldn't be, school shouldn't be able to ask you that stuff, and let alone ask you that protected stuff with the sole purpose of discriminating against you because of it. I mean, that's just insanity. I don't know. Even proponents of critical race theory have said what happened to my son is the absolute wrong way to introduce this kind of pedagogy.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's becoming more and more, popular. You mentioned SEL, social and emotional learning, and we are, both David and I are friends with a friend here in Texas who is just left that field because he saw that was the gateway, if you will, for a lot of this. And, the thing with social and emotional learning is it's not a class, it's, again, a pedagogy. So it covers everything. And so when you infuse that social and emotional learning, it kind of gets in without that critical thinking or without your knowledge. And so that's true. You used this word earlier, but that is indoctrination. Like, I'm fine talking about CRT or even bringing CRT as one lens. And David and I have, mentioned this several times, but where you don't even know what it is that you're being kind of taught is, and we go back to, you can't find the syllabus anywhere. And
right.
So all those things add up and you go, something.
And then, I feel like that's the part of this that makes it gross and icky, to me. Is that because then they can say, we don't teach that. And, we don't teach.
You have no way of proving them wrong. Right.
And that's what they can, come right to, and tell you right to your face. That's not in our curriculum. That is not in the description of the class. That is not part of the curriculum. That's what, what they can just tell you. And when you look at the stuff, and when you look at what the description of the class is, well, that isn't in the description of the class. But lots of things aren't in the description. That doesn't mean that they're not happening, and the only way to find out is if you are actually there. A lot of parents have realized some of the terrible things that are going on in their kids' schools and in their kids' classrooms with their teachers because of Zoom and because of cell phones and recordings. I mean, we've had some terrible things. Teachers giving cupcakes to students who are gay only or who come out as, I mean, like, that's wrong, or teachers chastising one student for wearing a MAGA hat or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't care what kind of hat you have on. If unless it is something just really outlandish and despicable and disgusting, patriotic does not fall in that category. So I just can't even imagine chastising a child over something that you find distasteful. And like I said before, you can definitely express your opinions on how you feel about things as it pertains to education and even social issues. But where there's a problem is when you start to assign good and evil and right and wrong to it and make that a prescription. Like just say this is how it is, and if you don't believe that, then you're wrong. Or you're bad. That is absolutely has no place in K through 12 education.
I want to move from this a little bit and talk about you being a Black conservative. I mean, you probably have faced a little bit of pushback against that. Like, can you tell us a little bit more about your feelings around that? Like, what have you faced some isolation? I mean, it's sadly, I mean, well, not sadly. I mean, it's usually most people who are minorities tend to be vote Democrat. So I love the unicorns. I love to hear from the unicorns. You're a unicorn. So tell us your life as a Black conservative.
I say I'm a lifelong conservative and I'm a lifelong Republican. However, prior to President Trump, I hadn't voted for a Republican in more than 10 years because I had felt like lots of Americans that, that they weren't representing what I believed in anymore, that they weren't doing the things that I felt like fall under, the conservative principles. And that was a lot of people. And, so when President Trump came along, it felt when he was talking to the Black community, when President Trump said, what do you have to lose? I'm looking around and I'm going, I ain't got nothing to lose around here. I mean, we were struggling. I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't get insurance. I couldn't afford Obamacare. My sons didn't have jobs. They had gone through all kinds of training programs and still couldn't find jobs. It was a mess. And we were struggling. We ended up losing everything. And, my daughter was going to a school. She was going to a school where they had decided to teach half the day in Spanish because they had so many Spanish-speaking students. And while there's nothing wrong with that for the Spanish-speaking students, my daughter didn't speak Spanish. So it was just like, what was I, how was I going to handle that? And I ended up sending her to a magnet school. And she was able to excel there. They did not know, and neither did I, that my daughter was in the 98th percentile, and they ended up putting her in GATE. Now, had she stayed at that failing school, because it was failing, we would have never have known that, And so, I mean, it was just when President Trump came along, it changed everything in my life. He had only been, president for like a year, and everything started to change. One of my sons got a federal grant for a training program that wasn't available before. One of my sons got a job in a brand new restaurant that was built in an opportunity zone that wasn't, an opportunity that had been available before. One of my sons just got a great job because they hired everybody that came in because they needed people to work because the economy was good. And I was able to get a knee surgery that I had been denied several times, by Medicaid, because they weren't doing knee and hip surgeries for people. They were just giving them pain meds and shots. And, the policies changed under President Trump, where people who had these minor surgeries got them so they could go back to work and not be lifelong dependents on the government. This is the kind of stuff. I mean, and when we talk about like being a Black conservative, those were some of the issues that we were facing, being poor, living in the Black community, and having to deal with some of those things. People talk about jobs and all of that kind of stuff, and why can't you get a job when a Democrat is president? Well, theoretically you can, but if you don't have a car and you don't have bus fare, and you found a job, but that job is 2 hours away by bus, and you got to walk 45 minutes to get to a bus, what is the likelihood that you're going to be able to keep that job? Oh, and by the way, you got a disabled mother at home, and you know what I mean. So it was just those are some of the issues that people face, and I when I think about my conservatism and how it affects me and how it affects my life, there's a line. There's this weird line that I've got white kids, so I'm protecting them from some of the exact same things that I'm supposed to be in favor of because I'm Black. You know what I mean? And it's just like, no, I'm not going to be in favor of scapegoating my kid. And I'm certainly not going to be in favor of you telling my other kids that they can't do better because some imaginary system is keeping them down. The system doesn't have to keep them down. We changed that very quickly under President Trump. And I think it was Sonny Johnson who was talking to President Trump about this, and she told him what was happening. When you give money to these, when you give these grants to these cities, these Democrat-run cities, we still got to go through a Democrat to get them. So we don't have access to capital for businesses, or there's not the same kind of access or you have to grease the right palms in a Democrat district in order to get this business built. You know what I mean? That somebody else may not have to do. And it's just like we have to deal with that stuff on the ground. So even if the money comes from on high, even if the help or the legislation or whatever comes from on high, when you have this terrible system going on at the local level and you still can't get past it, that's where we need to focus. And so as a Black conservative, I listen to these people like Sonny Johnson and Maj Toure and Kira. I listen to them, and I don't agree with every single thing that happens and that they said, but I'm in a different particular situation that I can't say definitively on every single thing I agree with that, because I have this whole other side, right? So, but I find myself in the unique position of being kind of jumped by Democrats and Republicans on a lot of things, Sometimes, I get from Republicans, well, that's you sound like a socialist. Well, no, honey, I sound like a poor person who knows what it's like to be poor and understands the difficulties that poor people face, especially in the urban community. And so, if you're not there and you don't see what's going on, it's more than just it's more than just having no father in the home. My husband died when my kids were very young, and there was nothing we could do about that. But all of my kids have jobs because of what happened in 2017 for us. All of my kids were able to succeed because a pathway was cleared for us so we could get out.
First of all, I actually want to apologize to you because I love what you said. I love how you clarified because nothing is a monolith. I mean, Black conservative is not a monolith. Republicans, Democrats, they're not monoliths, and you really like showed yourself and your own individuality and personality through that answer. So I really appreciate you pointing that out.
Thank you.
It's so easy, we sit there and we blame CRT for putting us in these groups, right? I'm not this, I'm not that, and then here I ask you, well, what's it like to be, it's hard not to ask that question though, because it is a bit of a unicorn, like I said, but I really, I just want to tell you that I valued your response, because it just goes to show, I mean, we can't lump people into these categories. We can't label people, and it's messy.
I don't think you can do that in America anyway, because America, I mean, do you know what you are? I don't.
Right.
I mean, do you know what I don't know all of the things I am. I don't know all of the things I am, and I can be one thing one day and one thing another day, because that's America, and you can do that.
And that's what makes it beautiful too. That's what I love. I mean, we're very, very diverse in that way. That's.
Glenn Lowry was talking about that recently, about how he doesn't know if he could agree with his younger self on so many issues, even though the intent was in the right place and it seemed right at the time. But truth is, and I know people are like, slam it for this, but truth is fluid. What was true back then ain't true today. You know what I mean? You can't apply the same things and the same prescriptions and the same remedies for what was going on 20 or 30 years ago. You cannot apply them today, because today is different. We got technology. We got social media. I can't just send my daughter to her room to think about what she's done. There's stuff in there to do in there. You know what I mean? She got a TV and a computer. That's not no punishment. You know what I'm saying? There's things you can't. We've had to make some of those adjustments, and I think that one of the things that we as our society needs to understand is that yes, we can still keep the Constitution and also evolve our policies to all work together. Those things can still be relevant, and we don't need to change any of it, but we can certainly adjust some things to work with the way things are today.
So I'm laughing here. If you see the comments, that's my dad who thinks that you. See, my dad follows us, David.
Oh, does he?
Who says that you should run for political office, Gabs? Is that your next?
Good. And now I see the comments. That's great. That's great. Good point, Jim. Well, let's run
Wait, what was it? Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mr. Richmond. Thank
you. So, Gabs, after you win your case, you have to start thinking about the office you're going to run for.
Look, honey, I'll be lucky if I can keep my relationship together. I'm like, oh, Lord. Because, when you're doing this kind of stuff, it's like, it takes up a lot of time and energy. And I told my boyfriend, I said, honey, when this is over, we are moving to Italy. We're going to move to an island where ain't nobody, it's going to be us. And he's like, yeah, I don't know. And I said, well, I don't know. We'll see. The people might not let me leave. The people might not let me go. That's the advice I got from a civil rights leader, not to want to go.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. I mean, sometimes, I talk to friends who are like, well, we just want to go hide, whatever, find an island, whatnot. And it's like, no, this is worth staying around for. And if the people like us go and find the island, then it will continue to go downhill the way we've seen it. So you're very appreciated, your work and your courage to do what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I hope that more people will realize that you don't need to be brave. I mean, like, if we all fight this, and if we all try to come to an understanding about what it is that needs to happen, then nobody has to be brave, you know?
We're not there yet, though. We're not there yet. We're working on it. That's why we're doing what we're doing here. That's why we're having these conversations. We're working on it, but it's still, I think, very frightening for a lot of people. A lot. So again, you
I
are.
don't understand. I don't understand it. And I mean, Elena, me and Elena talk about that all the time. And she says, Elena says, you would jump in front of a speeding bullet for your kids, and this is the bullet.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is turning into a real culture war. And really, I think in a lot of ways, we're talking past each other in a lot of aspects, and it's allowing for bad things to seep in. It's leaving a vacuum for bad things to get in, and we don't need to do that.
Yeah,
could not agree more.
Well, thank you very much. Oh gosh, we appreciate you.
Take care.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Hold My Drink. Like or subscribe to the show and check out the show notes for links to source material and to our website where you can find what each of us is reading every week, different news with different views. If you have a topic that you would like us to explore, drop us a line. And join us next week as we say Hold My Drink and the conversation gets real.